The first time I saw the water pouring out of that pipe, I honestly thought something upstream had burst. That's how hard it was coming down, like somebody had opened a valve and aimed the whole hillside straight at my backyard. And standing there in the rain, watching muddy water swallow the tomato beds my wife and I had spent years building, I remember thinking one thing real clear. Somebody up there had made a decision that was about to become very expensive. I live in a little town outside Asheville, North Carolina, on a narrow piece of property tucked at the bottom of a long, gentle slope. It's not a huge place. Nothing fancy. A modest cedar-sided house, a wraparound porch I rebuilt with my own hands 15 years ago, and a backyard that slopes just enough toward the tree line to catch morning fog when the weather cools off. It's peaceful, quiet enough to hear birds before sunrise and tree frogs at night. That hill above me had been untouched for years. Wild grass, a few maples, deer crossing through around dusk. Nobody bothered with it. Then one spring, everything changed. A development company called Briarstone Communities bought the entire hillside. At first I didn't think much of it. Land gets sold. Town grows. That's life. But within a couple weeks the place looked like a war zone. Excavators. Bulldozers. Dump trucks grinding uphill from dawn till dinner. Backup alarms echoing off the trees all day long. I'd sit on the porch with my coffee and watch clouds of dust roll over the ridge while crews carved roads into the hill like they were trying to reshape the mountain. My neighbor Linda from 2 houses down came by one afternoon carrying zucchini bread and said, "Well, guess quiet's officially over." I laughed and said, "Looks that way." She looked uphill and shook her head. "Big apartment project, from what I heard." "Yeah," I said. "Hope they know what they're doing." Turns out, they didn't. 3 weeks later we got a storm. Not unusual for late spring around here. Hard rain, thunder rolling through the valley. I was inside finishing dinner when I heard something strange outside. Not thunder. A rushing sound. I opened the back door and just stood there. Water was flying across my yard. Not rainwater falling naturally. A full stream, fast and muddy, tearing through the grass from uphill like a creek had changed direction overnight. The raised garden beds were already filling. Mulch floating. Fresh seedlings bent flat. I grabbed my rain jacket and headed uphill. The construction site was a mess. Mud everywhere. Tire tracks filled with water. Then I saw it. A giant corrugated plastic drainage pipe sticking out from the slope behind a stack of gravel, aimed directly downhill. Aimed directly at my property. And that thing was dumping water like a fire hose. I just stared for a second. Then I spotted a guy in a yellow vest walking toward one of the excavators. Big guy. Late 40s maybe. Beard. Clipboard tucked under one arm. I walked straight up. "You in charge here?" He barely glanced at me. "Depends." I pointed at the pipe. "That drainage line's flooding my backyard." He looked over, then shrugged. "Temporary runoff. It's dumping straight into my property. Rain's gotta go somewhere." I actually laughed. Not because it was funny, because I couldn't believe that was his answer. Somewhere doesn't mean my land. He adjusted his clipboard and looked irritated now. "Sir, grading's almost done. It'll be fine." "No," I said. "It's not fine." He gave me that look contractors give when they think you're wasting their time. Then he turned and walked away. Didn't even bother pretending to care. And I'll be honest, that stuck with me more than the flooding. Because accidents happen. But dismissing somebody while your mess is washing across their yard? That feels personal. That night after dinner, I pulled out my property records from the filing cabinet. I spread the survey map across the kitchen table and measured the slope lines. Then measured again. The drainage pipe wasn't just pointed at my yard. It crossed the boundary easement by several feet. That changed everything. Next morning I took pictures. Wide shots. Close-ups. Water stains. The pipe. Mud against the fence line. Linda wandered over while I was snapping photos. "Looks bad." "It is." She leaned in and looked uphill. "They send all that down here?" "Yep." She whistled low. "Bold move." That made me grin. Yeah, bold's one word. Weather forecast said another storm was coming Saturday afternoon. I decided not to say another word to anyone. Didn't call. Didn't argue. Didn't warn them. Just waited. Saturday came in humid and gray. By noon thunder started rumbling over the ridge. Then rain. Heavy. Within 20 minutes the pipe started roaring again. And this time it was worse. Water slammed into the backyard so hard it peeled mulch away from the beds and shoved it against the fence. My wife's herb garden collapsed into mud. A row of stepping stones shifted sideways. The little cedar bench near the tree line tipped over and started drifting like it wanted out. I stood under the porch roof watching the whole thing happen, hands in my pockets, heart pounding, and weirdly calm, because right then I knew exactly what I was going to do. I waited for the storm to break, changed clothes, grabbed every photo, printed copies of the property survey, and Monday morning at 9 sharp, I drove downtown to the county engineering office. That's where things finally got interesting, and where Briarstone's very expensive week officially began. Monday morning, I got to the Buncombe County Engineering office 5 minutes before they opened. Small brick building, fluorescent lights, coffee smell hanging in the lobby. The kind of place nobody visits unless they absolutely have to. A woman at the front desk looked up over her glasses. "Can I help you?" "I hope so," I said. I handed her the survey and a folder full of photos. She flipped through a few pages, saw the water pouring from the drainage pipe, and her eyebrows lifted just a little. "Give me 1 minute." She disappeared down the hallway and came back with a guy named Martin Delaney, county engineering inspector. Mid-60s, silver hair, looked like he'd spent half his career telling contractors bad news and the other half not caring how they felt about it. He laid everything out on a conference table. The survey, the photos, permit filings, drainage plans. For 20 minutes he barely spoke. Then he leaned back and tapped one page with a pen. "Well," I said, "that a good well or a bad one?" He gave me the tiniest smile. "For you? Good." Then he turned the permit packet toward me. Buried in the approved site plan was a runoff requirement. All temporary stormwater had to remain contained on their parcel. No discharge onto neighboring land. No exceptions. And there was more. Silt barriers required. Retention control required. Runoff diversion had to match approved grading. Then he pointed at the photo of that black plastic pipe. "That line isn't listed anywhere." "You sure?" "Very." He looked at me over the page. "If they installed that without approval, they've got a serious problem." I asked what happened next. He said, "Next, we go take a look." By noon 2 county trucks were parked on my street. Martin came with another inspector named Carla Reyes. Sharp eyes, hard hat, clipboard, no wasted movement. We walked around my backyard first. Carla crouched by the washed-out garden beds and took notes. Martin checked the fence line. Then we headed uphill. The construction crew saw us coming and everything slowed. You ever notice that? How job sites suddenly get quiet when county vehicles show up. One excavator shut off. A foreman lowered his radio. Guys started pretending they were very busy staring at lumber. The same supervisor from before spotted me with the inspectors. His expression changed fast. He came walking over. "Can I help you folks?" Martin pointed uphill. "We're here for drainage inspection." Supervisor crossed his arms. "That line's temporary." Martin said, "Temporary still requires approval." He didn't answer. We walked straight to the pipe. And right on cue, rainwater still draining from the previous storm trickled through it into my yard. Carla photographed everything. Measured slope. Marked boundaries. Supervisor kept talking. Grading crew installed that Friday. We were going to remove it. Martin didn't even look up. It crossed the neighboring property line. "It's temporary. It's illegal." That landed. Hard. Supervisor's face tightened. Carla opened the approved plan packet, pointed to drainage layout, then pointed to the actual pipe. "Not here." She flipped another page. "Not here either." Then Martin wrote something on his clipboard. Supervisor saw it. "What's that?" Martin tore the top page free and handed it over. "Immediate stop work order." I swear the entire hillside went silent. No engine noise. No radios. Nothing. Supervisor stared at the page like he thought maybe it would disappear if he blinked. "You're shutting down the whole project over runoff?" Martin looked him dead in the eye. "No," he pointed at the illegal pipe. "I'm shutting it down because you ignored approved drainage controls, discharged onto neighboring land, and created erosion risk." Then he added, calm as ever, "and because apparently you thought nobody would notice." That one almost made me laugh. Supervisor looked at me, and for the first time, really looked. Like he suddenly realized the guy he brushed off in the rain had paperwork. County paperwork. Different game. By sunset the site was dead quiet. Heavy equipment parked. Crews gone. The whole hill looked frozen. And if I'm being honest, sitting on my porch hearing nothing after weeks of nonstop machinery felt incredible. Linda came over with iced tea and leaned on the railing. "Well," I pointed uphill. "County shut them down." Her mouth dropped open. "No kidding. Immediate stop order." She raised her glass. To bureaucracy. I laughed. To bureaucracy. The next evening around 6:30, there was a knock at the door. I opened it. Different guy this time. Suit jacket. Expensive boots. Late 40s. Perfect haircut. That corporate confidence some developers wear like armor. He stuck out his hand. Ethan Mercer. Project manager for Briarstone. I shook it. Barely. He looked past me toward the backyard. Then uphill. Then back. I understand we've had a misunderstanding. That word almost got me. Misunderstanding. Like my garden beds had accidentally washed themselves downhill. I kept my face straight. You built an illegal drainage line into my property. He nodded once. We're removing it. That's a start. He paused, then gave the polished smile. We'd appreciate your cooperation so work can resume quickly. I leaned against the door frame. My cooperation? Yes. Ethan, my backyard looks like a creek bed. His smile tightened. We're willing to address concerns. Good. Then we can move forward. No, I said. He blinked. No. Removing the pipe isn't enough. I walked him around back. Mud still caked against the fence. Garden beds collapsed. Grass ripped up. The cedar bench tilted sideways. He looked around and said nothing. I pointed uphill. You dumped runoff from a multi-million-dollar project into my yard. Then I looked him right in the eye. You fix drainage permanently. You restore every inch of this yard. And county signs off before anybody starts building again. For a second, he didn't say anything. Then that may take time. I shrugged. So does being shut down. That one landed. He glanced uphill. At silent machinery. At unfinished framing. At crews not working. Every day that site stayed idle had to be burning money by the minute. He finally nodded. We'll review options. I smiled. Do that. He left. Linda texted 10 minutes later. Was that suit guy from the hill? I texted back. Yep. How'd that go? I wrote he suddenly believes in drainage. Her reply came instantly. Miracles happen. 3 days later trucks rolled back in. Only this time nobody was pouring foundations. Nobody framing walls. Every crew on site was focused on drainage. Excavators cut trenches along the slope. Stone barriers went in. Retention channels. Heavy gravel. Filter fabric. Temporary berms. Then a larger excavation began halfway up the hill. A real drainage basin. Huge. Way bigger than anything they'd originally planned. Martin stopped by during inspection and stood next to me watching crews work. He folded his clipboard and said quietly, this basin alone probably cost them 6 figures. I looked uphill. Think they'll remember my address. He actually laughed. Oh, I think they already do. And that should have been the end of it. Problem found. Problem fixed. Simple. Except that Friday afternoon. I learned the site supervisor still hadn't quite accepted losing. And he made one last move that almost pushed the whole thing into another fight. By Friday afternoon, the hill looked completely different. Instead of framing crews and concrete trucks, it was drainage specialists, excavation crews, inspectors walking around with clipboards, everybody moving carefully, measuring things twice, talking low. And honestly, I figured that was the end of it. Briarstone had taken the hit. County got involved. The illegal pipe was gone. The basin was nearly finished. My yard was already starting to look better. Fresh topsoil had been delivered. The collapsed garden beds had been rebuilt. A landscaping crew had even restaked the flower borders exactly where they'd been before. For the first time all week, I actually sat on the porch and relaxed. Then around 4:30, I heard a truck pull into the gravel shoulder beside my mailbox. I looked up. Same supervisor. The one from the rainstorm. Yellow vest. Clipboard. Only this time, he wasn't walking like a guy in charge. He looked irritated, tired, like somebody had spent 3 straight days getting yelled at. He came up the driveway and stopped a few feet from the porch. Need a minute. I didn't stand. Go ahead. He looked back at the hillside, then at me. You could have just called again. I actually laughed. I did call. You went to the county. After you ignored me. His jaw tightened. We had a deadline. And I had a flooded backyard. He shifted his weight. Whole project got delayed because of this. No, I said. Whole project got delayed because you ran a pipe into my property and hoped I'd tolerate it. That one hit. He looked away for a second, then gave a short, frustrated breath. You know how much this cost? I leaned back. You know how much my wife spent building those garden beds? That shut him up. For a few seconds, all we heard was equipment on the hill and birds in the woods. Then I said something I hadn't planned. And weirdly, I think that's what finally got through. I didn't want your project shut down. He looked at me. I wanted basic respect. That's it. I pointed uphill. You could have knocked on my door before cutting into that slope. Could have explained the runoff. Asked permission. Worked out a temporary plan. Instead, you dumped it downhill and acted like my land was disposable. His expression changed. Not friendly. Not apologetic exactly. But different. Like maybe for the first time all week, he actually saw what the problem had been. He rubbed the back of his neck. Then muttered, yeah. And after a second, that part probably could have gone better. That might have been the closest thing to an apology he'd given anybody in years. I nodded. Probably. He looked uphill again, then gave one tired laugh. Mercer says that basin cost enough to buy a lake house. I smiled. Then maybe it's doing its job. That actually made him laugh. Small one. Then he shook his head and walked back to his truck. And just like that, the fight was over. The following Tuesday, county came back out. Martin, Carla, a full inspection. They checked runoff control, measured grading, reviewed the drainage basin, tested the slope barriers. Then we got lucky. A quick afternoon thunderstorm rolled through. Perfect timing. Everybody stood outside and watched. Rain hit hard. Water rushed down the hillside, straight into Briarstone's new basin. Collected, filtered, redirected. Exactly where it was supposed to go. Nothing touched my yard. Not one drop. Martin watched for a minute, then clipped paperwork to his board. All right. He signed off. Stop work order lifted. Just like that, construction resumed. Concrete trucks came back. Framers returned. Noise started again. Only now there was a giant engineered drainage basin carved into the hillside like a permanent reminder of what happens when shortcuts meet county inspectors. Summer rolled into fall, then winter, and by the next spring the apartment complex was nearly finished. 3 buildings, parking lot, landscaping, fresh sidewalks. The kind of place people drive past and think, wow, nice development. Most of them would never know that whole project sat frozen for over a week because somebody thought my backyard was the easiest place to dump water. My garden came back too, better than before. New grass filled and thick. Tomatoes came up strong. My wife replanted herbs. The cedar bench went back under the maple tree. And every time it rains now, I still check. Habit. I'll stand on the porch with coffee and watch the hill. Water pours into that massive basin. Exactly where it belongs. Not my problem anymore. Linda still jokes about it. A few months ago, she walked over after a storm and pointed uphill. And part of me understands deadlines and pressure and construction crews trying to keep momentum. But then I think about standing in the rain that first day, watching muddy runoff destroy something my family spent years building, and hearing somebody shrug and say water's gotta go somewhere. Yeah, it does. But where you decide to send your problem says a whole lot about what kind of neighbor you plan on being. And sometimes one shortcut downhill turns into a very expensive lesson uphill. Now I'm curious what you think. Did I go too far getting the county involved? Or was shutting the project down exactly what needed to happen once they crossed that line? Drop your opinion in the comments because I read every one of them. And these stories always spark a bigger debate than people expect. And if you enjoy real property disputes where one bad decision turns into a costly lesson nobody forgets, hit like, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.